Hi, I'm Ellie and I'm here to talk about life with complex mental health problems and to bring awareness into how we can live a meaningful life alongside having mental health problems. So today I'm going to talk about eating disorders and the true cost of having an eating disorder.
This is editing Ellie from the future. Just adding in here that this is a trigger warning for anybody who struggles with hearing about eating disorders. I will be talking about things in quite a raw way, and there will be things around hospitals, like eating disorder behaviours. So please protect yourself. If you don't feel you'll be able to manage this content, please don't watch this video.
I've suffered with an eating disorder since I was in my late teens. I'm 35 now. I was first diagnosed when I was 17, but like many people, my experience of first seeking help was my mum taking me to the GP and the GP saying it's a phase, she'll snap out of it, and that was that. And that was when I was 17 and I was 24 when I first actually saw an eating disorders professional. So there's quite a big delay. The past year I have suffered from quite a serious relapse of my eating disorder. I may talk about it at a later time, but it costs me a lot. It nearly cost me my life, and it's basically affected every area of my life for the past 12 months, and some of these things are permanent, some of them will be reversible, some of them will take a long time to reverse. I want to talk about how eating disorders can really cost a lot more than just becoming skinny or whatever the world thinks that eating disorders are about. For me, as I said, like the past year is January 2023 now. I've really struggled with an eating disorder relapse, and it definitely was my biggest expenditure in 2022. And I'm talking about financially, but I'm also talking in terms of other life costs, my physical health, my emotional well-being, activities I could do, going to work, all of these sort of things. Everything in my life has been affected by anorexia. There is this overall view in the general population that all eating disorders do is make you skinny, and that's the end of it. Spoiler alert, that's not what an eating disorder is about. You can have an eating disorder at any weight. Overweight, underweight, normal weight. Weight might change, weight might stay the same. Doesn't matter. It's not about the weight. It's not about that. It's about what's going on inside here. I've actually had several people, including a nurse, say to me in the 24 hours prior to me collapsing and having near cardiac arrest, I have had people say, "Oh, you look like you've put on weight, you look well," presuming because I'd come into the appointment not crying, whereas I had been crying the week before, that everything was okay. And I ended up in a really dangerous situation less than 24 hours later. So it really is not about what you look like. It is about what is going on internally here and here. Obviously, like the ultimate cost, and I unfortunately have lost people to this, is lives. Like people lose their lives from eating disorders. Anorexia has the highest death rate of any mental illness. 1 in 5 people will die, either through physical complications or suicide, and it's inevitably people who could have a long life in front of them. They are intelligent, they're caring, they're funny, they might be successful in work. It does not discriminate. So I'm going to attempt to break down what my eating disorders cost me this past year. Remember, this is my journey. This is not everyone else's journey, but I'm sure a lot of people will relate to this or maybe see these things in people they know. So first off, physical health costs. I've been fairly lucky, despite the amount of years I've struggled with an eating disorder, that my body's actually been quite kind to me. It's recovered from each relapse. It's generally maintained its stability. It's not left me with any lasting damage. But I am 35 now, and I'm no spring chicken, and my body hasn't stood up to the pressures that I put it under, and this has been a particularly bad relapse for me. So I've definitely had a considerable physical cost. So some of this is weight changes. That's what people see on the outside. My weight has been up and down this year, and it's not necessarily indicative of what's going inside my head, but that is a thing that can then happen, and that's been really difficult to deal with in a number of ways, and not the ones that are on the surface, and I'll probably talk about them more later. Another thing is that I've been in constant joint and muscle pain, like for months and months now, especially because I was unable to keep myself warm over the winter. I'd spent hours crammed up against the radiator, curled up in the fetal position, and everything just hurt. Even having a bath didn't make it any better. Like my muscles, my joints, like lying down hurt because of the way my body was at the time. And so I was exhausted as well because I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't resting properly. Connected to that, feeling the cold, like I can't even describe the type of coldness that you get when you are struggling with anorexia. Like it goes deep inside your bones, like your bone marrow is cold. Sitting in the bath for hours doesn't help, like putting on extra blankets doesn't help. I didn't realise at the time, but now looking back on photos from even like a month or two ago, you could see I was cold. My lips are blue. My skin was kind of like this weird bluey colour. It just didn't go away, and it didn't help because I wasn't really drinking hot drinks or eating hot food, and it was just awful. And people don't see that happening. People can't feel that for you, but it's very much happening. My brain has been constantly foggy and unable to concentrate. It's just, I can't stay in a conversation. This is whether I'm relapse or making positive changes. I just can't grasp things going on around me, and the chances are if you've had a conversation with me in the past year, I don't fully understand the conversation. I probably checked out halfway through. My teeth have been affected. I've got a tooth that needs to be removed just because temporary fillings keep falling out. Purging doesn't help that. Physically, my heart has been really affected. I've always had a fairly low heart rate. I am usually quite physically active anyway, but it was seriously low this past year, and as I mentioned before, that was something that actually nearly killed me. That's been difficult to deal with. The complications that I've had to deal with have left me in hospital. Really not pleasant, and again, it's an invisible thing. People can't see it from the outside. Dehydration, I struggle with fluids as well as food, and I've basically been chronically dehydrated for probably the last 8 or 9 months, and to the extent where my veins have collapsed, people can't get fluids into me. I've struggled with my bladder. I'm still struggling with my bladder because it's not used to holding any liquid, and just everything feels awful when you're dehydrated. You have no energy, your vision is blurry, it's just you can't function when you're dehydrated at all. Obviously it's had an effect on things like my bloods. They've been all over the place. I won't go into loads of detail about that. And digestion, again, without going TMI, that's not been fun. I have struggled with laxative abuse, and that's messed up my lower digestive system, and it's not pleasant. I have a lot of pain, and especially when I eat, and that doesn't make eating therefore a very appealing activity. Again, not going to go into that. This is not the place to go into it. So moving on to the mental and emotional costs. It goes without saying that eating disorders as a mental illness take a big toll on you mentally and emotionally. All that matters is food and weight and being able to control that, and that just means that everything else sort of falls by the wayside. I've already mentioned not being able to concentrate or think properly, to the extent where I haven't been able to actually even understand what I'm doing. I lost capacity earlier this year to make decisions around my physical health and nutrition. I couldn't connect the two together. It was really, really difficult to hear that you can't trust your own brain. Thankfully, like once I started eating again, that kind of helped me to understand a little bit more. Basically, when you're starved, you can't do that. An obsession with food, this is again something that people don't realise. They think that, you know, anorexics just don't think of food. They just have this like magical ability to just have great self-control, and it's just no. Every single second of your day is filled with thoughts about food. I would go around supermarkets and just spend ages looking at all the packets, never buying anything. I'd make lists and lists and lists of things I wanted to eat. I'd sit for hours on Instagram scrolling through what I eat in a day reels. It's basically the human sort of like response to starvation is, well, I need to find food. Like when we were hunter-gatherers, if we were hungry, we had to go out and hunt food, and so that plays out nowadays in an obsession with recipes. I'd like, when someone else was eating, I'd want to know what it was, what it tasted like, all of these sort of things. I'd feel guilty sometimes, like especially if I'd been watching reels or looking at recipes. I'd feel guilty, almost as if I'd binged on the food when I hadn't. None of it had touched my lips. But yeah, my whole life it was and still is centered around food. Like I will worry about the next meal, even if I planned it out. I will worry about tiny little things. Also, another emotional and mental effect is numbing. Eating disorders help numb emotions, and you just don't really feel anything that's real. Like I would feel emotions and be tearful around food and weight, but if something bad happened in my life, I wouldn't connect to it emotionally. I definitely didn't really like feel happiness or joy because I couldn't connect to things. It means that I'd be like really oddly calm when something serious happened, like being told I could have died, but then I was like having a total meltdown over the wrong sort of milk being put on my Weetabix in the morning. Now I'm couple of weeks into recovery, I'm starting to eat more and my emotions are coming back, and it's really difficult to cope. Body image, not necessarily an issue for everyone with an eating disorder, but for me this is a huge aspect of it. Even though I've like done like various exercises in the past that show that I see my body very differently to other people see it. I did one that showed that I actually saw myself as 140% of what I actually am. That's like a whole half an extra Ellie that I'm seeing and that you're not seeing. I'll spend huge amounts of time body checking. I'll cancel plans because I don't feel that my body looks right to have to go to the social event. I can't even explain how much I think about it. Even when I'm lying in bed, I'm worrying about how I look. I'm lying in bed, no one's seeing me. I'm under the duvet cover. It just takes up a huge amount of thinking space, and it does when I'm well. Sleeping becomes almost impossible. You're exhausted all the time, but you can't sleep. I would spend hours and hours awake in the night, and then not be able to get back to sleep, but then I'd be exhausted during the day. It's just this cycle of like just exhaustion, but you just can't sleep. Back with the emotional stuff, like you also couldn't connect to other people's emotions. Like I've been really like, I don't know, isolated, and part of that reason is because I couldn't connect to other people's emotions. I'm quite an empathic person normally, but I just couldn't understand emotions anymore, and it made me into a friend I didn't want to be. I want to be a better friend than that. So we haven't even got onto the financial costs of an eating disorder, and there are financial costs. Some of it varies from person to person what these might be, but it could be the expenses of buying binge food. It might be loss of income to not being able to work. It might be treatment costs. But these are some of the ones that have affected me in the past year. So the cost of food, especially in the beginning of my relapse, like diet, low fat, low calorie food would be what I was looking for, and it's ridiculously expensive. You are paying loads for not much energy or nutrition. I would also hoard food that I wanted to eat but not actually eat it. I also am very particular about what I consume now. I'm trying to eat again, like everything has to be just right. I can fixate on a certain food as a safe food for a while, and like that's the thing I need, and it doesn't matter how much it costs. The cost of living crisis is like a real issue for people with eating disorders. Like those of us recovering, like food is our prescribed medication, but unfortunately we can't get it on prescription. So like it has to be a priority, but it's really hard when you need to choose between like, do I eat or do I put my heating on? And both actually are really important for people in recovery from an eating disorder. And that brings me on to heating costs. I've been off work and largely housebound, and that biting cold has been a very real issue, and putting an extra blanket on doesn't touch the side. So like needing to have my house heated has actually become quite important, and I feel really guilty about having to heat my house, but that's it's just been necessary. Like hypothermia is a real danger for people. Literally throwing food down the drain is also another cost. For like a long time it seemed really pointless me buying food because I either threw it back up or I didn't eat it or it would go off. I hate food waste, so this was a really big problem. But if I don't buy food, then I can't possibly eat, so I have to continue buying food even if it's actually like backfiring. In the past, when I've been in binge purge cycles, this has been a much bigger cost when I've bought like hundreds of pounds of food a week and eaten it in a bulimic frenzy and thrown it all back up again, literally throwing food down the drain, and that has a really big cost. I know I have friends who've got massive debts just from binging and purging and the cost that comes with it. Another thing, and I won't go into detail here, is laxatives. Unfortunately, I have been very addicted to laxatives, and they cost, and they can cost quite a bit, and the cost gets more because you need more as time goes on. Another way that things cost is your clothes. Your size might be constantly changing. For me, I've been up and down everywhere this year, and I'm kind of constantly like buying small clothes, growing out of them, shrinking back into them again. Then it's winter and I need to buy winter clothes, and I don't want to buy new clothes, but I have to because I haven't got anything to wear, and it's just a vicious cycle of buying clothes and throwing them away. And the amount of times I've had to like clear out my wardrobe of small clothes over the past 2 decades is crazy. But it's also not very nice to be sitting around in clothes that don't fit you, whether they're too big or too small. It's not nice. And it does help to feel a little bit better about yourself if you're wearing clothes that fit. So like one of the ways I've dealt with that this year is going online to places like Vinted and buying things for a couple of pounds that I'm going to use rather than splashing out on new clothes. Another thing is work. Like because of my eating disorder this year, I have been off work more than I've been at work in the past like 10 months or so. I have a habit of starting back too soon and then going off work again. I'm a bit of a keen bean, I love my job, but that's affecting me financially. I'm now not able to receive full pay when I'm off sick because I've been off sick too long, and the benefits system doesn't really help very much. The new way that the benefits work in the UK with the universal credit means that disability doesn't stand for much, whereas I used to get a lot more help because I had a disability. That now doesn't happen, so like I'm struggling to cover my rent and bills each month. Treatment costs, this can vary wildly. Like depends on your postcode, it depends on what eating disorder you have, it depends what's available in your area, it depends on waiting lists, it depends unfortunately on BMI all too often, and this can end up being quite a big cost for people. I did initially at the beginning of this relapse pay for private sessions with a eating disorders OT I'd worked with in the past, but unfortunately it wasn't something, like the way I was ill wasn't something that could be managed by one person working alone. It needs to be a multidisciplinary team meeting. So I ended up not continuing it, and I wouldn't have been able to continue it anyway because it was just too much of a cost for me. But I was referred and accepted by the eating disorders team 6 months before I actually saw someone from the eating disorders team, during which I'd already been in hospital like multiple times. That can be a massive cost for people. Like some people will never get to the point where they're able to be admitted to services, or they're even able to be referred to services, and the costs of treatment can be really, really expensive. Another cost is paying for stuff you don't use or do. Particularly the last 4 months, I've had 2 holidays, one of which did happen and I did go, but it was a mistake. I ruined it all for my friends. I needed to come back early to seek medical treatment. That meant buying an expensive flight home last minute. That cost me financially, and it also cost my friends their enjoyment of the holiday. I was supposed to go away in January and I had to cancel that, and we didn't get most of the money back. Those are like big costs, and there are things I've bought tickets for I can't attend, or things I've said I'd go to and I'm too unwell to go. Most of the money I've spent this year, to be honest, has been wasted because I've not been able to take part in anything. And I want to make plans, but when it comes to it, I can't do it. So it's really, really difficult. It feels like a catch-22. And lastly, moving on to the social cost. Social cost of eating disorders isn't really thought about very much. People tend to think about the mental and physical health, but they are really quite significant and can be some of the most long-lasting. So obviously work is something that is affected. Like, I am really lucky that I've got a really supportive workplace and I will have a job to go back to, but I've also lost many jobs over the years because of my eating disorder. It only adds to the feeling of unworthiness, failure, isolation that a lot of us feel. That feeling of not being able to contribute to society is really difficult to manage, and it comes with a lot of external judgment. You know, you're a benefit scrounger, all of this, you're just lazy, all of those sort of things. It just doesn't help. Relationships, like every single relationship in your life will be affected if you're suffering from an eating disorder. For people in romantic relationships, like, the eating disorder is like a third partner in that relationship, and actually sometimes the person you're in a relationship with can feel like the third wheel alongside you in your eating disorder. So that's definitely been a cost to me, that I'm 35 and I've never been in a romantic relationship, and a lot of that comes back to my eating disorder. My family, it's cost them a lot. My poor family's gone to hell and back several times in the past 2 decades, and it doesn't really get any easier each time that happens, and quite rightfully sometimes they need to take a step back, especially if I'm at a point where I'm unwilling to accept help, but I'm really fortunate that my family are always there for me when I do want to accept help. But the countless birthdays, Christmases, holidays, many more things have been ruined or controlled by anorexia, and it's affected my family a lot, especially my younger sister. Friendships. I am really lucky that I've had some friendships that have really come through thick and thin, and still lasted, pun intended, and I'm so grateful for this. But I've also had many that have not been able to withstand the pressures of an eating disorder, and so I have lost friends over the years, and I do understand why. But for a lot of people, this, especially if they've been ill for many years and have a chronic eating disorder, they can be quite isolated, and not really have very many people around them, because unfortunately the eating disorder becomes the most important relationship in your life, and actively turns you against friends and family and people who are trying to help you. Something that really does help is when people know their own boundaries and their limits, and sometimes when they need to take a step back and look after their own well-being. That's what makes a friendship stand the test of time and go through the ups and downs of an eating disorder. Lastly, socialising, which kind of I've talked about in all of these past ones, but most socialising revolves around food, drink, maybe physical activity, or at very least it requires you to have the energy to join in, and that usually means eating and drinking, even if that's not at the event. I've missed out on so many social events this year, even down to, like, I couldn't go for a coffee until 2 weeks ago. I wouldn't be able to go for a coffee with someone. I wouldn't even be able to order a water. Like, it just was something I couldn't do. And people really struggle to know what to do with you, and so then they just stop inviting you. Other things, I've tried to go, and it's just been super awkward because I haven't eaten or been drinking, and or it's been totally more than I can handle. I've pushed myself to have a meal out, and then it's ended up in a massive relapse, me cutting stuff out of my diet that I don't have the space to cut out. Also, I've been too unwell the past couple of months to even physically leave the house and go and get the energy to go and do something. Ended up being quite socially isolated, and I deleted Instagram and Facebook because I didn't want to get FOMO, but then that meant that people didn't know what I was doing and didn't invite me to stuff. I was in my own antisocial bubble, and that's just not me. Luckily I do have some people who realised that and knew that they needed to come to me, and even even if that was just to sit on the sofa and cry or watch me nap. Like, I'm really, really grateful for the people that did that. So that's just a glimpse of some of the things that an eating disorder can cost you and has cost me. There's many, many more. That list wasn't exhaustive, and as I said, this is my experience. This is not everyone's experience, but I hope it's something that people can relate to and maybe not feel like they're the only person who've struggled with that. Some of these costs are permanent, some of them are very long lasting. They're not going to go away overnight, even in recovery, and recovery itself takes up so much brain space that sometimes you're kind of in a worse situation for a while. It has to get worse before it gets better. As a friend, it's still like being aware that that person, even if they are in recovery, is still probably struggling with things socially, with anxiety around food, like, and asking them, you know, what can I do to help you? Like, would you like to eat with me somewhere else? Like, do you need to know the menu beforehand? That's really, really helpful. Recovery is one of the hardest things that people can do, but you can get through it, and people around you are so instrumental to that. I hope this video was okay. Give it a like and a thumbs up if you want to see more. Bye.